So I've worked on improving my audio quality a little bit, so future videos will have less white noise and background static. So hopefully the few of you who watch will appreciate that. But I had about an hour and a half of footage to edit down and ended up well under 10 minutes because a lot of what I ended up doing here didn't matter. Um, it may not be immediately clear from the video, but the right leg is it's a little too thin and it's not entirely conical. And I spent a lot of time just poking and scraping away with every tool on my desk just because that's how I work. I don't have a specific schedule or process when I'm working on things like this. I just tend to do what feels right until it looks right, which is why I'm switching between the sanding sponge and the needle file and the flat file and the semicircular tapered file, and then back to the sanding block, and then over to the wood carving tool. Each of these gives me sort of different effects and different, like a different level of control over what I'm doing. Like I can remove more material using the wood carving tool here to like reduce the sort of conical taper that's on the gondola's body. Whereas the sanding sponge gives me more of a control over wider areas when I need to work it down a little bit and kind of smooth out sort of the roundness of his head, which is something that wouldn't go as well with the like the flat needle file, for instance. But as I said, a lot of this turned out to be kind of pointless because despite all of the scraping and all of the dust I made, I eventually resigned myself to the fact that I could not sand this into the shape I wanted. I couldn't subtract it into the shape I wanted. So I went back in with a little wad of Super Sculpey and that little dowel rod tool I made, and I just slowly layered it back on to sort of fill out those areas that weren't round enough. And he does end up with slightly thicker legs because of this, but it also gives me more material to work it down so I can make the whole thing more symmetrical, and so I can have it with a cleaner, more uniform look. And this is something that is a little important because if I were to just go ahead and mold him and then cast off that mold in the state he was before with the sort of lumpy legs and the sort of asymmetrical proportions, it would mean that every single piece would bear those flaws. And I know it's kind of obvious, but it's a thing where, anything that you have to fix after the fact, like anything you tell yourself like, oh, I can just sand that after it comes out of the mold, you have to do that for every single casting that comes out of that mold. Once it's been molded, you can't go back in and shave off a couple inches in the mold. You can't patch it up after it's already been in the mold. You either make a new mold or you have to fix up every single casting that comes out of there. So taking the time to make it right the first time, like I said in the previous video, measure twice, cut once. It matters. It's you want to do it right, you do it right. You don't accept, well, good enough, or I'll fix it later. It's not really going to be good for you. Um, the reason I've got a little hand towel here is for two reasons. One, to clean off the piece before I apply some Super Sculpey. All the leftover dust and fine particles from all the sanding tend to stick onto the Sculpey, so wiping it off makes it stick better. And also from working with it on my hands, you get sort of a slight layer of the oil there, or whatever that residue is, and it causes the Sculpey to stick to your fingers. So as you're applying it to the piece, it's peeling off every time you go to press it on. So using the towel to clean my fingers that way makes a difference. But yeah, probably shouldn't work. Probably not even recommended. But yeah, I applied a layer of Sculpey to his legs, and then just threw him right back into the toaster oven there for another 10 minutes and let him cool off. And as you can see, it just sort of solidifies into one piece. It bonds fairly well. It's probably could be chipped off back down to that base layer if I needed it to, but for my purposes and for the way I work, because this won't be the final piece, because the final product will be a resin casting, I can kind of get away with building it up like this, working it into the shape I want, and then cooking it up again and doing all that. That sort of thing probably bothers people who are far better with Sculpey than I am, and who can get far better results on the first try and far better final results. But for me, this is one step as part of a larger process. Not too much larger, but for me, the final product is technically a quality mold that has the proper shape and dimensions that I want. Not so much a perfect Sculpey sculpture that, you know, is completely structurally sound and doesn't have any seams or texture inconsistencies. And that's just sort of something you train yourself to understand, that you're not going to have every step be perfectly clean and flawless, because the steps that follow after it will build off of that. And in some of the stuff I've worked on, it's definitely not how you start, it's how you finish that matters. But I think that about covers it for this video. It's just a little bit more scraping and cleaning and sanding. The next one I do will likely be the mold making process, just because I don't want to bore you with lots and lots of videos of my hands vibrating against something. So that means I will likely come back with another video once the face is sculpted and everything's proportional and looks all nice and smooth. And then from there we will make the mold and maybe do some casting on that. Yet again, this was just a piece I wanted to do for fun, a little palette cleanser, something a little bit more simple than the Goblin Slayer or some of the other miniatures. And I don't know, after this, maybe I'll do another video. Maybe people will have questions or things I can explain for them. Maybe I'll do a little post-mortem on some of my other projects and talk about the process there. But yeah, this is just one of the more tedious steps in the larger scheme of sculpting, casting, mold making, and all of that. As always, if you enjoyed it, if you want to see more, if you've got questions or suggestions, let me know, and maybe it'll be part of another video. But for now, we'll do a little bit of music and call it a day on this video. Thanks for watching.